Welcome to An Unconventional Life, a podcast where we share stories about the crazy 1% out there who earned their doctoral degrees and then went on to use them in crazy, cool, unique, and unconventional ways. Here's your host, astrophysicist turned teacher, author, dissertation coach, and more, Dr. Russell Strickland.
Hello, this is Dr. Russell Strickland, and I'm your host for An Unconventional Life podcast. Today, I have with me Dr. Angela Pearson. Dr. Pearson has recently earned her PhD in organizational and industrial psychology. She runs her own consulting firm. She's the mother of many and several grandchildren, so I'm sure we're going to get to talk about that. She's told me about some of the challenges she faced in her dissertation process, and this is going to be a very inspirational story for you guys that are kind of struggling through the dissertation right now. So I can't wait to start our conversation with Dr. Pearson. Before we jump into that, as always, this episode is brought to you by Dissertation Done. So if you are an adult doctoral student, you're an unconventional doctoral student, you have a family, a mortgage, a job, and you're undertaking a dissertation project, reach out to us and let's see if we can't help you with our Fast Track Your Dissertation coaching program. We get our students through the dissertation process usually in about a year, and often a year or two faster than they would on their own. So check us out at dissertationdone.com/done. That's dissertationdone.com/done. And if by any chance you are done and you're looking to expand your authority, you want to get your expertise out there into the marketplace so that you can help more people, why don't you consider becoming a published author? We take groups of people using our Expand Your Authority program from blank page all the way to published author. It's a lot easier and a lot quicker than you might think, as long as you have the guidance and accountability and support along the way. So if you're interested in that, check us out at dissertationdone.com/book. And with that, Dr. Pearson, welcome. Thank you so much for joining me here today.
Thank you. How are you today?
Doing well. We're recording this on a Monday, and as both of us have mentioned, it seems to be a hectic day, but always great to be able to take a little time off to talk to someone of your accomplishment and your stature, and I'm grateful that you had some time for us to talk today.
Well, thank you so much for having me.
So first thing I love to ask folks is, listen, it's not kind of a sane or rational decision to go out and pursue a doctoral degree program, especially as an adult. I did it. You did it. A lot of our listeners have done it. Tell me what motivated you to make that decision and to make that jump to pursue a PhD program after you'd already accomplished so much in your life. What made you decide to go and jump in for this?
Well, for one thing, I'm a lifelong learner, but this was a personal goal for me. I lost both of my parents at an early age, 21, and within 15 months of one another. And both of my parents went to college, but neither one of them finished. And I felt like, okay, this is something that I probably could do and accomplish and be the first one in my family to become a PhD. And I actually did. So this was very personal for me.
That's awesome. Yeah, so many folks do mention that as being really a personal goal. It seems to be it's an identity issue almost with a lot of folks. And gosh, I'm sorry to hear about you losing your parents so early. I lost my parents. I was in my late 30s and early 40s when my parents passed. And I remember distinctly at that age, and I had my own kids and all this, already I had already earned my PhD by then. And I remember at that age thinking, gosh, I'm an orphan. I mean, it seems odd, but I think there's something that affects everybody. And gosh, at your age, I can hardly even imagine. But you've done so much since then. So it's amazing how the human spirit can overcome those sorts of things.
Yes, resilience is wonderful.
And I'm sure it was useful as you went through this doctoral program as well.
Yes, it was.
So tell me a little bit about, you made that decision. What made you decide at the time that this was the right time to do it? Because obviously there's no right time, but what made you decide after a while, I've been wanting to pursue my doctoral degree and now I'm going to do it. What was that moment for you?
I don't know. I guess I would say that moment was I felt I had extra time, even though I really didn't, because when I started, I was actually in the military part-time and working full-time, of course, 4 children. And so I said, hey, if I'm going to do it, I better get started now, because if I don't, I'm not going to do it. So
Yeah.
I wanted to push myself to get it completed in a timely manner and not have so much time between my last master's degree and the PhD.
Right.
So,
Yeah, getting back up on the horse, getting back into school is always tough, because you kind of, after you earn your degree and you feel like you've accomplished something, and then you get to live your life for a while, and then when you decide to go back, you're kind of giving that back over to that school again. So that's tough. One of my students who we've had on the podcast, Dr. David Braswell, when he graduated, I asked him the best part about it, and he said it was getting his life back. And I'm sure folks can resonate with that. And you're kind of not you when you're working on your dissertation. So you had a little extra time, even though, like you said, busy life still. You go back into the doctoral program, and what was it like getting started? Going through those classes.
it was tough. Having to understand scholarly writing and then write to that degree in order to accomplish what needed to be done was a struggle. Again, especially having work, having family, being in the military part-time.
Mm-hmm.
So, I almost gave up within the first year, simply because I said, I can't do this. It's just too much. And then I remembered the conversations that I had with my parents, before they passed and years before. And I said, okay, I did this for a reason, so I'm going to push forward. That helped a lot as far as getting there.
Yeah, that's one of the things that I always talk to our students about as well, is you've got to have a reason why. And you need to keep that, like, in sports, they talk about bulletin board material. When someone says something to you about how you can't do it or whatever the case might be, you've got motivation to keep going. And it shouldn't be to show those guys. That's not a good reason why. But whatever it is that's in your heart that's driving you, if it was something your parents inspired you, if it was a goal that you want to be able to accomplish for yourself, it's like you want to inspire your own kids. Whatever it is, it's really important to keep that front and center, because there's going to be a late night at some point when you look in the mirror and you ask that person, what are you doing to be? And if you don't have a good answer, it's so easy to walk away, or just not to do what you need to do to be successful. Most students don't walk away, right? They just put off, the working on their dissertation for one night and then for 2 nights, and all of a sudden things aren't getting done. So that's the trap you can fall into.
That's so true.
Yeah. So the classes started to be a difficulty, and the time was starting to be a difficulty, but you pushed through that. After you kind of recommitted yourself to the process, did you find that things started getting easier, or how did it work out for you? After you got to that point where you thought, I'm going to quit, and then decided you're not, and kept moving forward?
Well, I'm a spiritual person. I won't go too deep into that. So I did pray a lot and ask for guidance, patience, and strength to continue to push forward. So it didn't get easier at first. But as I started to get more organized and become more intimate with my committee, then things started to get better, and then they started to get easier.
So this is now you're in the dissertation process, then, when you're talking about your committee, is that right?
Yes.
So what was that like starting off, like the transition between classes and then working on your dissertation? What was that like for you?
Well, I wasn't as prepared as I thought I was, even through all the residencies that I had went to. But once I actually got the committee chair, I failed to realize the relationship I needed to build with them immediately in order to get them in sync with my topic.
Okay.
And so I went through a phase where I actually changed my topic 3 times.
Oh my God.
The first 2 times.
We got to talk about that. How did that happen?
So my first topic, since I was in the military and I was doing safety, I wanted to be occupational safety and health.
Okay.
And that was a topic that my committee was not familiar with. So then we decided, okay, I'll change it again. And I wanted to do domestic violence related material, which is very common. Right. And that was a no-go as well. So then finally,
Why did
I
they
was
say that
working.
was a no-go, or how did that fall? How did that idea fall apart?
Well, I was told that that topic was so broad and so many different elements of that topic had already been explored. So being able to come up with new research was, it was kind of tough.
Yeah. Well, that's too
So
bad
after,
we weren't talking at that time, because that's one of those things where a lot of students do have this idea of, I have a very broad topic, and I like to tell them, no, it's an area of interest. Like, until you have something that you can actually research and there's a plan for collecting and analyzing data, it's really not a topic yet. And you just keep, narrowing down and tightening that focus. But clearly, like they said, there's a lot of research that's been done on that. And you can always plant your flag right beside some other project that's very, very similar to, do a new project that's very similar to something that you've read about. And that's new. As long as it's not the same thing that's been done before, it's new. So that's something that I would have probably encouraged you at the time to look at that. But because when a committee says you have to narrow things down, usually it's not narrow it down over here, but let's just keep tightening up the idea that you have until we can turn it into a really small, laser focused objective.
That's true. I agree. And I was actually kind of glad that they brought that to my attention, because it helped me actually refocus to the third and last topic that I chose, which was lean strategy deployment. I was actually a continuous improvement coach at the time.
Right.
So very, very good topic. It wasn't broad. A lot of people had not studied it to the capacity that I did. So that helped a lot.
And that was something because of your existing affinity, the fact that you're actually working in that area. I assume that it was a little easier to collect data on that as well versus domestic violence. We've had several students that have done projects on domestic violence, and it's tough to get folks to want to be part of your study or agree to be part of your study, because that issue is so sensitive, and brings up memories that folks aren't very interested in reliving a lot of times.
That is so true. Yeah, and that when I was thinking about that topic, it was because I'm a domestic violence survivor. So, I felt at that time that I had a lot of information to contribute. But as you said, it's a very sensitive topic, and getting people to participate in that is very difficult, because no one wants to relive a negative situation.
Right.
So.
Right. Even so, the way that a lot of our students have been able to broach that topic is that these people are not just, survivors, but they're kind of, I don't know how you want to say it, conquerors, they're overcomers. They've done things to change who they are since they were in that situation. And then by sharing with other people that might be going through that right now, you can help them. And so, yes, the reliving part can be difficult, but when you talk about, not only are we going to just be reliving the moment, but we were able to talk about how you overcame that as well. That's been a good strategy for recruiting. When we found that folks are interested, if they're talking about both parts of the story, they're much more interested in that than if they're just dwelling on the negative, so to speak.
I agree.
But it also brings up an important point for anybody who's working on their dissertation right now, which is make sure you know where you're going to get your data. When you pick a topic, the universities will tell you all the time, pick something you're passionate about. I actually disagree with that, because it can kind of get you stuck. You start saying, I want to do it this way, and your committee wants you to do it that way. Well, you graduate when your committee's happy with the project, not when you are. So you want something that that you're able to kind of be flexible. And if your committee says to move over a little to the left or a little to the right, you're like, okay, I'll do that, instead of feeling like, no, you're taking away my, this passion project from me. So that's one thing you got to be careful about. But the other thing is just the logistics. Like, how are you going to get your data? You should know where it's coming from way before it's time to start collecting data, because otherwise you can fall into this trap of everybody likes your project, but you can't actually get it done. And that's obviously not something that would be helpful if you're trying to graduate.
This is true. I like the point that you made about, when your committee is asking you to move to the left or move to the right. So many times I found myself wanting to be resistant and saying, no, I think what I'm doing is the right thing.
Right.
But understanding where they're coming from, because like you said, you don't finish until they say you finished.
Right.
And they have a lot more experience than you have. So definitely being able to listen and take that advice and run with it is great.
It's not even just about their experience, though. It's their proclivities, their biases, their history, their prejudices. You have to satisfy that committee. And the dissertation is not about being right or wrong. You can do it your way and it'd be perfectly good for the right committee. But for your committee, you've got to do it however they want to see it. So that's why we tell students, who are really passionate about what they're working on, let's just hold off on the passion for right now. And when you're done, when you graduate, you can write your book. You can get that message out to the world. You can say it the way you want to say it. You can include all of the emotion and all of the passion that you're feeling, because that doesn't belong in your dissertation anyway. They're going to cut that all out in the editing phase. So you can really communicate with that emotional level and help people who need your help by doing it in a book later on. And that's something I've had a lot of fun working with folks on those projects, because it's kind of like the gloves are off. With the dissertation, you got to be careful. You got to listen to your committee, give them what they want. But with your book, you can do whatever you want. So that's a very liberating time for a lot of our students.
I like that.
Yeah. And the other
definitely
thing to
agree.
keep in mind is, we talk about the dissertation committee kind of holding the keys and they say go. Think about it a little differently. Think about it like it's not your dissertation, it's theirs. You're making a custom suit of clothes and it's got to be tailored to your committee, or you're custom building a house, but it's got to be according to their specifications, not yours. So yeah, you're the one building it, or you're the one putting it all together. And it's your work when you're all said and done, but it's work that's being commissioned by someone else, and they're going to pay you with a degree when you finish. So if you can think about it that way, that it's a professional endeavor rather than a passionate endeavor, that can be helpful too.
Most definitely.
So you mentioned the topics, and you had to go through 3 different iterations for your topics. Once you kind of were able to settle on something that your committee was happy with and that you knew you could finish, tell me a little bit about the story then. How did things go from that point?
Well, it wasn't that simple either with that third topic.
Never is.
They
right?
were they had no knowledge of the topic.
Right.
So it was interesting. I actually pulled together a web conference so we could all see each other and talk, because a lot of times when you're doing things online, it's just email, it may be telephone, but we saw each other, we talked about it, explained to them that I was exhausted with topic changes, and that this was an area of expertise to me, and I felt that there was research that could be done. And so with that, we all agreed to disagree, but agree that I could move forward with that last topic. So
yeah. And I've actually found that when a lot of times when the committee isn't necessarily an expert on a topic, it's a little easier for the student, because they can, basically, as long as you tell a good story and everything's believable and everything's backed up, you don't get the committee arguing as much. Rather, they're learning. And if they have questions for you where they think, oh, I didn't quite get something, then they'll ask you to improve something. And it actually works really well in that regard, versus if you've got a committee member who feels like they're a real expert, then you've got to make sure you kind of honor that expertise and more so they're going to be telling you what they want to see and what they expect, a little bit more so than if they don't really know the topic. And then they're just looking to see, does it look like this was well researched? Does it look like the story makes sense? Do I understand what she's teaching me here? And if I do, then she's doing a good job. And if I don't, I'll tell her where I'm confused so that she can, sometimes they won't use language like that. Sometimes they'll say, you got this wrong, or this isn't clear, or something like that. And you have to go through and deal with that. But that's ultimately what they're doing, is they just want to understand the story you're telling them and make sure it's being laid out, obviously, the very strict way that academic writing requires.
Yes, definitely. I did feel like I taught them about a new topic.
Yeah. So how did the defense go then when you got to the point where everything was done, you collected your data, made sense of it and everything? What was the defense process like for you?
It was nerve-wracking. All of the stories that you hear about, like you're standing in front of a judge and the jury and so on and so forth. It did feel like that. But I made that situation. I made myself feel that way. They actually made me feel very comfortable. But I was able to get through.
Tell me a little bit more about that. What do you mean by you made yourself feel that way?
In my mind, I did some self-talk, some negative self-talk,
Okay.
based off of the stories I had heard about, oh, they're going to eat you alive if you say this or if you don't say that.
Yeah.
So I went into it with that mindset, unfortunately. But I was able to bounce back and give a
Good.
pretty good first round oral defense.
Good.
And my second oral defense, of course, I realized in between the first and second, practice makes perfect, but you have to be
Mhm.
careful not to practice the wrong thing because you'll make that perfect as well. So I did
Right.
have a different demeanor
Yes.
going into that second round, that I owned it and that I was going to, show them what I was made of. And it went very well, very
Good.
well.
Good. Yeah. When I used to coach, I don't know where that phrase "practice makes perfect" came from, but when I used to coach my kids' little league years ago now, we always made sure we were drilling into their head, practice makes permanent. Whatever you do over and over again, that's what gets ingrained. So perfect practice makes
True.
perfect. We wanted to make sure we're doing a good job at practice, because whatever you do at practice, that's what you're going to do for real. But yeah, it's really unfortunate that you let the urban legends and the folklore and everything get you down, because usually these days, most of the time, committees, it's really supposed to be more of a celebration when you get to your defense. They invited you to the defense on purpose, right? They didn't invite you there to fail you, because that makes them look bad as committee members. They invited you there
Right.
because you're ready. And yeah, we always tell our students, just stay out of your own head, take it seriously, do a good job, but you're ready. You got this. By the time they accepted your dissertation in writing, they're on board. So what they need you to do is just to have a conversation with them, honestly, almost at a peer level. There's still a little bit of deference, because they still have to make one more decision for you or about you. But you're growing to the point where you're a doctor, they're doctors. That defense should be a little bit more of a peer level conversation. So if any of you guys who are listening are getting close to the defense, keep that in mind, that you've got this. You're there for a reason. You earned it. Don't let the negative self-talk get in your way, because it's really the biggest obstacle you face at that point. Would you agree?
I would totally agree. Confidence is key.
Yeah. Now I'll tell you, um, when I was a grad student at the University of Chicago, not in the defense stage, but earlier on, after our first year of classes, we had this candidacy exam, which all of the faculty took great joy in telling the students that none of the faculty could pass the candidacy exam. Because what they would do is they would go really deep on like several different professors' specialties. So like you had to know what this guy was studying really, really deep, and that guy, not that it was about the professors, it was about the material. But the point is that as you get away from graduate school, you specialize. And this is what you know really, really well. But the candidacy exam requires you to know this and this and this and this and this all really, really well. Professors like, none of us can do it. I said, like, legit, we'll walk into your office over the summer and ask you a question because we figure you know the answer and we don't. and that happened a couple of times. So that was what they expected of us. It was a really big deal. We worked really, really hard to prepare for it. So the way that it worked is you took a written exam the first week. It was like, I forgot, 1 or 2 days, and it was really, really brutal. Then you were supposed to know whether you did well on the exam or not, and specifically know the areas that you didn't do well on, because then you were expected, without any feedback, to go back and prepare further for those things, because there was an oral exam the following week. And in the oral exam, what they did is they basically were like a dentist getting out a sharp tool, finding a little hole in the tooth, and just picking at it and making sure that everything was solid by the time they got there. And so everybody knew that, whatever you didn't do well on the written exam, you better make sure you got it right before you go show up in front of that panel. And it really was meant to be, they were really meant to test you. It was not like a defense for a dissertation where I said it's more like a celebration. This was a test. They were really trying to challenge you. So that week between the written exam and the oral exam, we were walking around the halls and saw on the professor who was in charge of administering the oral exam this little printout, and it was rules for giving an oral exam. I don't know where he got this from. It was printed in some sort of magazine or something. Rules for giving an oral exam. And he talked about how you set it up like an old British medical theater. Like if you've ever seen from Victorian times, they have these really high theater is a very ramped thing. It goes all the way around, and then there's the cadaver is in the middle.
In the middle.
And the professor's teaching down there. Well, what they said is the professors need to be strategically placed around the outside of the theater. The student is sitting on in the middle with lights and on a swivel chair. And one of the rules was that any group of professors who could get the student to turn all the way around 360 degrees got a point. And any professor who was able to turn the student around so fast that they literally fell off their chair won the exam. And it was kind of a cute article, except it was the guy who was administering the oral exam next week that had it on his door. And so I was very, very nervous going in. I knew what I'd messed up on. And sure enough, about 5 minutes into the oral exam, one of the professors started asking about it. And I answered her question, and she said, "I'm satisfied." Without dropping a beat, the guy who had this posted on his door from the other side of the room said, "Well, I'm not." And my heart just went all over the place. And he asked me some other question. And I remember in my head saying, "Oh my God, what am I going to do?" Wait, you know what he's talking about. You know how to answer this. And I'm like having this conversation in like 1 or 2 seconds inside my head. And it's like, this is what you need to say. And then I started telling him. And I think that is probably the last time in my life, honestly, I've ever really been nervous about anything. And that was a long time ago. But at that point, I was like, well, if I can get through that, I just have to slow down, think about things, and, I'll be able to figure it out. So it was a rite of passage, I guess, is the way that they looked at it. It was really tough. But ultimately, I look back on that as being something that was probably a good experience, because I faced a lot of stuff since then. And I've learned not to worry about it. I deal with what I have to deal with, but there's no real point in worrying about anything that you can't deal with. If you were to ask me a question I didn't know the answer to, I would have just had to say, "I'm sorry, I don't quite know the answer to that. I can look it up. We can come back and talk about it later," whatever. And quite honestly, they actually did that to one of the other students. And that was exactly what they were looking for at the time, was for that student to say, "I don't know," because that's part of it too. As a doctor, people trust you when you talk. And so if you start spouting off about something you don't know what you're talking about, that's a problem too. But yeah, these days I don't see that happening so much anymore. These days it seems like it's, when you go into a defense, certainly they want you to be successful. So anybody out there listening, try to remember that, because it'll help out a lot. And you got this. You're ready for it. So anyway. So unfortunately, that defense was not the the fond experience or memory that I would have hoped you would have had. But what about afterwards? What was the best part after you finished that defense? I mean, at the end, did they actually get to say, "Congratulations, doctor"? That's often how these things go.
Well, it was kind of funny because they told me to go away from the phone.
Yeah.
I don't know where they thought I was going. So I put myself on mute and I went away from the phone. I could still hear them talking. And it was so funny. They was like, "She did an awesome job. Oh my gosh." And then one of the committee members said, "Well, do you think we should tell her she's Dr. Pearson now, or should we wait?" And I'm just in the other room like, I was so excited. So then I stayed away from the phone a little too long, and then I could hear them saying, "What did she do? Did she go get lunch?" So then I come back to the phone, and they said, "Congratulations, Dr. Pearson." And then I tried to contain
that's so
myself.
awesome.
But it was
How did that feel?
Yeah. It felt amazing.
Yeah.
Probably one of the next best feelings to giving birth to my children.
Yeah.
It was just an amazing experience. I said to myself, finally, I have done this.
Yeah.
So it was a blessing.
So cool. That's so cool. That, usually they're a little bit better with the technology. There's usually like hold technology that you can tell someone, "We're putting you on hold and we're going to talk about you now." So at least that way, when they come back, you're still there waiting for them. But yeah, I have, before I started Dissertation Done, I've been on faculty and been on some of those calls. And that is always my favorite part, is when we get to, "Congratulations, Dr. So-and-so," because it is such an impactful moment. It is kind of the culmination of everything you've done. Unfortunately, you still have a little work to do after that, right? You still have to get your I's dotted and T's crossed for publication, I'm guessing, right?
Most definitely. Yep.
Now, you mentioned this wasn't long ago. Do you remember how long it was between your defense and when the university finally said you're all done and you don't ever have to talk to us again? Finish. Do you remember how long that took?
It took about 3 weeks.
Oh, that's not too bad. Yeah,
it took about 3 weeks.
Yep. It's usually a couple of months, but 3 weeks, that's not too bad at all. Because that, for a lot of folks, that seems to be the longest part. They're like, I'm done, but I'm not done.
Exactly. Yes, you still have to maintain the things that you need to take care of to finish up. So
just get those little bitty things finished. So, all right. So then you finished. You have been christened Dr. Pearson. You finished dealing with the university. What came next? What was it like now with this new doctoral title?
I tell you, it was funny because I still struggle to call myself Dr. Pearson sometimes. So actually knowing that I could put that in front of my name and then having the different conversations with people about, well, what kind of doctor are you? And then explaining to them what my specialization is and so on and so forth. So, and I don't know, it's been good. It's been real good.
Well, so the thing that that I've noticed is that for anybody that knew you back when, you're the same Angela, right? But it's the new folks that you meet.
Yes.
That, now you're Dr. Pearson. And that for a lot of folks, it's a little bit of a head trip that they really do treat you differently. Yes. Was there a story that you can maybe relate to where you felt like you met somebody new and they treated you differently than they would have a few years earlier?
Probably. I don't know.
I know. Yeah. I remember a story from when I was in graduate school. My college roommate was getting married, and so his parents flew me back down from grad school so that I could be part of the wedding party. And so we had to go to, the day I got in, we had to go to the rehearsal dinner that evening. We were trying to get checked into the hotel. They provided a hotel room for me, which was really nice because I was a really poor graduate student at the time. And for some reason the room wasn't ready. And his mom, who was the head of the education department at the local university, she was, asking what was going on and so forth. Said, listen, it's really important. We got to get him into a room because we've got to go. We're going to be late for the rehearsal dinner. And the person at the desk was just exasperated. And she said, her name wasn't Smith, but she said, Mrs. Smith, and was getting ready to explain to her why it wasn't ready. And she took a little step back and kind of crossed her arms and looked down a little sideways and was like, that's Dr. Smith. And the woman looked at her, was like, I'm sorry, let me go get the manager. And everything got taken care of right away. And I remember looking over at her and I was like, awesome. That's something. Like, I don't know if I've had one of those moments since I earned my degree, because outside of professionally, I don't use the title at all. I don't introduce myself that way or anything else. But if I'm doing work professionally, then I do. But that was one of those cases where I was like, well, that was really special.
Oh, it makes a difference. While you were talking, you made me think about a childhood friend I grew up with, and his father is a chiropractor.
Okay.
And his name is Dr. Fleshhead. And when I received my PhD, he started calling me Dr. Pearson. Yeah. And it was really weird because all my life I've said Dr. Fleshhead, and then it's been like Angela. So when he acknowledged that, it was amazing.
Yeah.
It was.
Yeah. I still keep in touch with a couple of my students from Dissertation Done long after they graduated. And one of them, they always would call me Dr. Strickland when we were working together professionally, which I consider to be appropriate. But then I called one of them up to check in on him later on, and I called him Dr. So-and-so, and he thinks it's now cute to call each other doctors back and forth now. We're on a first name basis, awesome. But he still thinks that's cute. So. And then I know some folks will go out. You can't do it these days. We're still, in this COVID lockdown period right now as we're recording this. But some folks would go out in a little group when they graduate, and they go to the airport, and they would page each other on the overhead thing. So it would say, paging Dr. Pearson, come to get a white courtesy phone or something like that. You have to get like, yes, it's Dr. Pearson. I'm going to go get it.
Oh, that's funny.
Yeah, it's little indulgences, right? I mean, you work hard, you've earned this. It's one thing to be obnoxious about it in front of people. You
Yes,
have to call me doctor when they're like your kid's school teacher or something. But it's nice to indulge a little bit because you worked hard, you earned that title. And like I said, I think that some folks don't use it professionally, and I think that they should. It's you did earn it. It's not really being, a jerk, so to speak, to say that you're
that's
Dr.
true.
So and so in a professional situation. Um, no point in hiding that accomplishment. People will treat you differently when they know, and you should not be shy about it. Absolutely. So,
That's true. You've earned it.
what's the best thing that's happened, would you say, since you've graduated, with respect to having earned your doctoral degree? Um, what would you say is the best or most unexpected thing that's happened to you in that time?
Well, I have a part-time consulting business named
Okay.
OD Synergistics Consulting LLC. And since I received my PhD, I've actually gotten a lot more business.
Yeah.
I've been networking in this area even through COVID, and been able to get that business up and running
Yes.
much more efficiently since my PhD. It's helped a lot.
Opens a lot of doors. Having that doctoral degree, people gives you immediate credibility, right? People assume that you know what you're talking about when your first name is doctor. Then you just got to make sure you don't prove them wrong later on.
That is so true.
But yeah, that's wonderful. So what kind of clients do you help, and what do you tend to do with those clients?
So I help individuals and also organizations,
Okay.
and I help them with organizational development, leadership development, strategic planning, leadership development, all those great things.
Awesome. So, and I assume that that's part of your passion. That's part of your calling that
It
you're
is.
able to follow now that you have that degree.
It is. I love helping others.
Congratulations. That is really awesome. Um, yeah. Is there anything else you'd like to tell folks who are going through this process right now, who are still kind of struggling in the dissertation process, that you've learned from your own experience?
Yes, most definitely. Number one, don't give up.
Mm,
Continue to believe in yourself because you started this journey for a reason
right.
and you're going to finish it. And actually leverage the resource groups.
Yes.
I know through my school, I joined a couple of resource groups on Facebook and interacted with other people that were going through the same things as I was.
Right.
And it helped a lot to keep me grounded and know that if they can achieve it, I can too. So
Yes.
make sure you use your support network.
Yeah, it's really important. I mean, that's part of the reason why I put this podcast out here every week, is to help you know that you're not alone. Because so many people, when they're going through this, they don't personally know anybody else who's going through this dissertation process at the same time they are. A lot of people don't personally know anybody else who went through the dissertation process ever, because it's only like 1% of the population who successfully earns a doctoral degree. So unless you're working in a university where all the doctors come together, you don't see it that much, just kind of out there in the world. So knowing you're not alone is important. And like you said, having a group that you can lean on is also important. So whether you go out and bring someone in to support you, like we do for our students, or you can find support online somewhere, it's really important to have that. Both from an idea of knowing that you're not alone. Also, there's a normative peer pressure, a positive peer pressure that builds up when you are in a group of people that all have similar goals. And so that's really important as well.
Yes.
Awesome. Well, Dr. Pearson, thank you so much for joining us here today. I really appreciate it. Now tell folks how, if they wanted to get in touch with you, if they needed some help with leadership development or wanted to continue this conversation in any way, what's the best way for them to reach out to you?
The best way to reach me is at linkedin.com. You can find me under Dr. Angela Pearson.
Awesome. So we'll have that down in our show notes and link to it. So if somebody would like to just go directly there, they can click on the show notes. But look up Dr. Angela Pearson on LinkedIn, and you will find her there. I'd like to remind everybody that this episode has been brought to you by Dissertation Done. If you're struggling with your dissertation, just getting ready to get started, and you want some help, guidance, and support to get you done as quickly as possible, go to dissertationdone.com/done. And if you're out there living your unconventional life right now and you've got a message to share with your audience and you want to expand your authority platform so that you can put your expertise in front of more people, a great way to do that is by becoming a published author. There's no better way to attract people to your business than by telling them I literally wrote the book on this. So if you're interested in that, go to dissertationdone.com/book. Once again, Dr. Pearson, thank you so much for being here with us today.
You're welcome. Thank you for having me.
Awesome. And for all of you out there, go out and live your unconventional life.
This has been An Unconventional Life. Thanks for listening. If you enjoyed today's episode, subscribe now to keep getting inspirational stories of unconventional lives as soon as they're released. Until then, go out and live your best unconventional life.